tornadoes in Cyprus. Ready, apparently, we're told to carry out airstrikes, which they could carry out as early as tonight if they do get a yes vote. But we know, of course, the Americans don't need our firepower. They have more than enough on their own. In terms of the risks that we face back here in Britain in terms of getting involved, is our siding with the United States and Saudi Arabia, Bahrain against ISIL, is that going to make Britain safer, or is it going to, as many people fear, be a recruiting sergeant and make this a more dangerous place to live?
Look, in the short to medium term, it's going to make Britain much more unsafer because ISIS has now made clear since last Sunday that the West is a target, and they have called on all their followers to kill as many Westerners as possible, kidnap them, and we've seen what happened in Algeria with a French hostage being kidnapped within 12 hours of that call and being beheaded by a group linked to ISIS. So I would put to you that because of the airstrikes in the past 2 months, the West has become enemy number one for ISIS, which wasn't the case because for ISIS, a localized group, the enemy was very much the Shias and Iran. But now we have put ourselves in the middle of that tornado, if you will.
But in a way, we had to put ourselves in there as human beings to protect the innocent Shia people who just apparently were the wrong kind of Muslim for ISIL, barbaric butchers. Look, we were always a target for Islamic extremists. The West is epitomised by America, the idea of hypocrisy and decadence, that's America, and we are seen as the closest allies of America, and we were always a target anyway, weren't we? In which case, is standing up and fighting making us more of a victim?
It is very much so the case that we were a target. But remember, things have to be clear. ISIS is not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has a global view of the world, and for them, the West is their first target. ISIS was a localized movement that wanted to grab territory and install the caliphate. So Iraq and Syria were the first places they wanted to install it. But the question is, and I agree with you that we'll always be in the middle, why didn't we intervene in Syria? And that's where the big issue is. Because for a lot of Sunnis, they're saying, look, there was a chemical attack last August. Children died. There was a red line, and nobody intervened in Syria at that time. But now you're going into Iraq and saving the Shias. So we have actually, instead of being, human rights defender, we have picked one side, and that's what the Sunni extremists are reproaching the West, that we have two different standards and that we are basically playing the game of Iran.
Can I ask you said, Olivier, that in the short and the medium term, Britain will become much more unsafe. But in the long term, will this pay off?
In the long term, if we have the right strategy, yes. But I suspect that, unfortunately, because we haven't been consistent in our choices, we might have to leave in a few years and leave the debate going on. But unfortunately, the narrative that we're putting together today is not going to get any Sunni extremists to ever come back to our side, and it's going to get them as well more recruiting in the West.
Olivier Guetta, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. He's a consultant in security and counter-terrorism. Very much appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. So what do you think? The UK joining the airstrikes on ISIL in Iraq make Britain a safer or a more dangerous place to live? You could argue we don't need to join in at all. We can say, yes, we support you, but we don't actually need to join in. It doesn't have to be RAF tornadoes flying in from British bases in Cyprus, because the Americans have... frankly, our contribution is... it's sort of twiddling the little finger. In terms of American military might. They don't need us. In the same way, they don't really need the Saudis or the Bahrainis or UAE or anyone else, because they've got all the firepower they need. It's about the diplomatic message that says that there is a whole collection of allies, a coalition against ISIL, and therefore it makes it more legally, morally, internationally acceptable. But it could put us more in the firing line. So I want to know, will the UK joining the airstrikes on ISIL in Iraq, as is very likely to be agreed by Parliament this afternoon and could happen as early as tonight, is that going to make Britain a safer place in which to live because we are tackling the jihadists? Or is it going to make it a more dangerous place to live, as they have called, as Olivier points out, for all Westerners to be killed, for ordinary Western people living in Western countries to be kidnapped and to be beheaded as a message to the rest of the West. I want to hear from you. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Coming up also after an update on the traffic and travel. We'll get to your calls. And also after 2 o'clock, we're going to cross to Iraq to find out from a reporter on the ground there how people are reacting to news that Western nations are pushing for more airstrikes in the region.